Good evening. Welcome to week 7 of political violence and terrorism. I just want to welcome you again to week 7 and just go over some few points of introduction. PowerPoints should be marked by tomorrow. I know I've been a little bit behind on them, but they should be graded tomorrow. I should have all the papers from this week graded by the end of this week, that were due yesterday, graded by the end of this week. I also should have some of the participation done. I know I've been a little bit behind on that, but I should be able to catch up on that as well. The final, I'm going to talk about more next week, but it's a cumulative overview of everything you've discussed, so shouldn't be too new for most of you. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to have a kind of a Google Hangouts this Thursday at 9 p.m. I'm trying to familiarize myself with the technology, but if you can subscribe, great. If not, we'll try and work another time. But that's kind of introduction so far. Last week I think most of the people identify all the security issues with the kingdom. I'm not going to rehash that, and I think most people realize that it's a movie, so you're not going to have all those dramatic elements that you saw in the movie occurring in real life. But I think it was kind of a good overview of an investigative process. And then I talked last week about the Gora, Professor Gora, talking about the rule of law and terrorism, and that kind of is a segue into this week's topic, high-value targeting, leadership targeting specifically. Why is it important? When does it work? When does it not? Is it worth it? And that's kind of what we're going to explore today. So, just to start off with introduction. There we go. And you have to forgive me. This is the first time I'm using this application, so I might be a little sloppy on it, but we'll see where it goes. But just introducing. I want this in your papers. So make sure it's part of your final. Make sure that you include it. And the reason I bring this is because your policy paper, your final paper, is going to be, if you're writing it from a policy perspective, they're going to ask, does high-value targeting work? Will high-value targeting work against Haqqani network or Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula or the FARC? These are all relevant questions. So you need to kind of address that. And let's say, again, I'm going to choose a Haqqani network for those of you who are choosing that. You're going to ask the question, or someone's going to ask you, okay, is it going to be worth it to go across Pakistan to kill this person? Jalal Haqqani, let's just say. Is it going to be worth it to cross the border? And there's certainly advantages, but there's great disadvantages. You might get people killed in Pakistan. You might cause a diplomatic issue. You might cause collateral damage that upsets the diplomatic process between the United States and Pakistan. So the question is, not only can you do it, but is it worth it? Is it worth the trade-offs that you're going to have? So that's what we're going to want to focus on. And, the big arguments, does it work? And I know my handwriting looks like I'm a first grader here, but, I'll probably get a little better at this. But arguments, a lot of people here, again, say, it doesn't work. It does not work. They say that high-value targeting, and you've probably heard all this, you can't kill your way out of a problem. And that's true. You can't kill your way out of a problem. And they'll point to this. This is Israel against the West Bank here, and they'll say, the underlying problem is what's going on with the Palestinian people, and high-value targeting isn't going to solve that. So they'll point that out and say, you can't. We're not going to kill other people without trying to solve this problem. And others will point this out. This is in Afghanistan in 2006. Collateral damage. High-value targeting does cause collateral damage. You kill people that you don't intend to. And sometimes many times the trade-offs aren't worth it. You're killing too many civilians for a low-level target. So that's kind of an argument against. But there are also arguments for, and this is a prime example, and it's justice. So even if he's just a figurehead at this point, this is Osama bin Laden, it's worth it to kill him just for the sake of justice. In other cases, here, sometimes this is the only show in town. This might be your only tool in the toolbox, and this is particularly in Pakistan. If you're trying to kill Al-Qaeda, you're not going to send thousands of people, thousands of U.S. soldiers into Pakistan to conduct a counterinsurgency operation. Sometimes this is the only thing you can do, is leadership targeting. So in that case, then yes, it's whether it's effective or not, it's the only thing in the park, and you have to employ it. And then the third thing here, charismatic leadership. And this is Öcalan, and he was the head of the PKK in Turkey. And after he was arrested by the Turkish authorities, the organization fell apart because it was almost a cult of personality around him. And the organization just pretty much deteriorated significantly without him. So, the argument is that sometimes certain terrorist groups, you just have to kill one person and the entire organization falls apart. So that's kind of the arguments for, and then kind of the arguments against. And here's some kind of examples of failures and successes. And the biggest failure would have to be, this is the drug wars. And this is, Escobar, Pablo Escobar, who was captured or killed in 1994. But there's been no difference in the drug trade. And you have to forgive again my bad handwriting here. No difference since we killed Escobar, since we captured Noriega. No impact. So, people thought, hey, we invest a lot of time, we get him, it's going to stop the drug trade, and it did not. So that's a significant failure. Other failures, Zarqawi. It really didn't have an appreciable effect on the Iraq insurgency. Saddam Hussein, that's another failure. But with all the failures, there's been significant successes. I mentioned up here, Öcalan, he's a success. This is Atiyah. At the time of his death in 2001, he was 2011, sorry. He was the number 3 man in Al-Qaeda. And this is an important concept. He was the operations guy. He's the guy who got things done. And when he was killed, there was no one to replace him. In fact, it got to a point that it was almost a death sentence to be Atiyah, or to be the Al-Qaeda's number 3 man. So if it's a death sentence, to be that, then you can't publicly recruit, you can't publicly fundraise, you can't publicly do operations. You have to do everything underground. And in fact, people don't want to be the number 3 person in Al-Qaeda because you will be killed doing that. So, this is probably a bigger success than even Osama bin Laden in my viewpoint, because you impact the organizational structure. So I kind of laid out, failures, successes, and arguments for, arguments against. But and I should reveal, I'm in the camp that high value targeting works, that it's effective, that it's not in all cases, but it's worth it for the most part. Now again, you have to add reason to this. If you think that killing a bunch of civilians to get one low-level Al-Qaeda guy is worth it, then I would disagree. But I think for the most part, it is. I err in the side of conducting high-value targeting, and here's why. I kind of have 4 reasons. The first I kind of touched on: charismatic leader, and this is again Öcalan. For those of you who are doing the Shining Path in Venezuela, Shining Path, sorry, in Peru, Guzman, he was definitely a charismatic leader that the organization centered around. FARC had several charismatic leaders that they were removed, and again, if you remove him, the organization tends to kind of fall apart. Not all leaders are charismatic, but there are certain ones that just bind people together. So that's kind of reason one. The reason two, as I kind of said earlier, is you deter second and third order leaders. And I kind of said this again with Atiyah here, especially true with Hamas, and it's important point on that. That again, no one wants to be the second and third order leader because they're going to die if the high value targeting program is that precise. Third, keeps the enemy off balance. And again, this is true for Hamas, true for Al Qaeda. You can't plan. You can't you can't plan. You can't coordinate. If you can't even talk on the phone, if you're worried about your survival, you can't do this. So if you employ the high value targeting program, then the organization's too worried about surviving that they can't conduct attacks. And then the fourth, something I've done and this is a little complicated, but I've done some research on this, is the secession process. You don't have vice president. You don't have exo commander relationships in these organizations. So if you kill the leader here, then the subordinates have to fight among themselves to secede. And when they do that, they tend to try and outflank each other to see who's the biggest badass. And this kind of drives the organization to become more radicalized. And it causes them to be alienated from the population. And this is what happened. I brought this up in an earlier lecture. Sikh separatism, that's kind of what happened there. There's been other, the GIA in Algeria. They just, when the second order leaders tried to ascend, they took the organization to such a radical level that it alienated the population. So this is why, again, I think high value targeting works and why I would employ it in the future. Let's kind of go on to the next thing is, let's say you're on the CENTCOM staff there, and your boss, you work for the ISAF, or let's say you work for the ISAF commander, and it's the day after the attacks against the U.S. Embassy, and he wants a high value targeting program to go against Haqqani, or to go against whatever terrorist organization he's facing. And he says to you, all right, design high value target. What does it need to be occurred for it to be the most successful? And I would say, sir, or sir or ma'am, whatever the case may be, there's kind of 5 things that for it to be successful. It needs to be, the most important, continuous. And this is Hamas leadership. This was the person killed in 2012 that started the recent flare-up in Gaza. This was Yassin, the head of Hamas, in 2004. He was killed, but it's kind of a little misnomer here because Israel continued to attack, continued, and because they were continuous, the Hamas leadership couldn't show up in public, and this led a decline in attacks against Israel. So just like those continuous way that they did it prevented Hamas from really amalgamating. So that's point 1. Point 2, I would say, is focus on mid-level as well. And I'll say, don't just focus on the top. If you get to the mid-level commanders, that, especially the bomb makers, the enablers, the financiers, that would be critical as well. Point 3 here, combine with other counterinsurgency. So in this case, again, I have this is the Sons of Iraq program. That was in Iraq in 2007. That was combined with the high value targeting program. And it was kind of like the carrot and stick. You could either end up dead, or you could end up in the arms of the allies making money. So you kind of have to give that option to whatever adversary you're facing. This is the wall in Israel. You heard that in the last lecture. This was pretty successful in combined with the high value targeting program to prevent Palestinian terrorists from coming in. So point 4, I would say, is precise munitions. Again, I apologize for my sloppy handwriting. And you heard the professor last week mention the shift from F-16s with 500-pound bombs to Hellfire missiles. This was pretty instrumental in them avoiding collateral damage. And then the 5th thing, I'd say this is probably pretty obvious: precise intelligence. You need to be able to identify your targets, who they are, where their bed down locations are, etc. And that is what makes you successful. So that kind of covers high value targeting. I'm going to make another lecture for some of the discussions for this week, but again, I want you to definitely incorporate this into your papers from here on in.